At the risk of sounding like a college junior who just got back from study abroad, I'm about to regale you all about the country of Japan. It's been about 2 weeks since I got back, and it still feels like a dream. That's why I can't shut up about it. Going there genuinely made me question some pretty foundational myths about the United States. It's the only place on earth I've ever been where I would easily consider leaving the US for. Maybe Switzerland, that's it. But since I'm a loyal American and I'm never gonna give up on this place, I thought I would take a look at why is it such an amazing place? What can we learn from it? First, this may sound trite, but it is perhaps the most remarkable thing about it. There are no fat people in Japan. This is remarkable because of how much it cuts across the grain of every other developed society. Japan, by all accounts, should be the opposite. It is a G7 nation, the third largest economy on earth. It has a population rich enough to afford the creature comforts of life. It is plenty consumerist. And yet, they somehow defy the trend in an opposite way to the US and the entire Western world. Japan has an obesity rate of 4%. Compare that to the US of nearly 40%, with the vast majority of our population clocking in at a classification of overweight. So how did they do it? The answer that Johan Hari arrives at is basically culture. Japan has a food culture that prioritizes simple food, high quality ingredients, lots of nutrition. Children are taught and encouraged at a very young age to not eat to excess. Schools can go as far as banning outside lunches to encourage healthy eating that they provide. Furthermore, the government actively penalizes people for being fat. In 2008, they enacted something known as the Metabo Law, which said that once a year, every workplace and local government in Japan has to bring in a team of nurses to measure the waistline of adults between the age of 40 and 74. If your measurements are too high, you are referred to counseling and workplaces that must actively help you lose weight. Companies that have too many employees that are fat are then subject to fines. Beyond that, though, is what Johan gets to. They just have a better lifestyle. Elderly Japanese people gather in public parks almost every morning for group exercise. Day-to-day life in a city like Tokyo requires traversing several flights of stairs, walking from one place to another. My average step count when I was there was 16,000 per day. Now, of course, I was a tourist, but I could see easily just living, going to work and going out to eat would require a ton of walking, way more than most Americans do. And what's amazing is that this does not require anything crazy. The Japanese eat plenty of seed oils. They have plenty of candy. They have a lot of junk food. They've got red dye in their cereal. They just don't eat that much of it. If you do, you're publicly shamed. Instead, they just eat variations of fish, meat, rice, fermented vegetables, and broth. It is incredible how full that you can feel on such a meal, and just how much weight you can lose if you do. In a sense, as Johan writes, the solution is staring us right in the face. It's lifestyle, stupid. Building on that is carrying over the reverence for respect of the body to then respect for each other. I cannot tell you how astonishing it is to feel as physically safe in a major city as you do in Tokyo. I have traveled the globe. I've probably been to almost every major city in the United States and arguably every major so-called global city. Absolutely nothing compares to Japan. It is difficult to describe, but perhaps best relayed in anecdotes. I witnessed children as young as 7 or 8 years old, taking the subway by themselves, walking home in the dark. Their parents have no fear anything will happen to them. You board a train, the conductor doesn't even check your ticket. The assumption is you're just sitting in your assigned seat. You visit a store, there are no smile, you're on camera stickers. There is no fear. People don't steal anything. Take a look at the Apple Store in Japan.
All the iPhones displayed aren't attached to any security device. The phones just sit on a MagSafe charger, which means you can literally pick them up and examine them without any restrictions. And this doesn't just apply to iPhones, but to other things in the store like headphones. Like, I could totally just pretend these are mine and walk out, which is crazy. But you know what's even crazier? Even their most expensive devices like iPads and MacBook Pros are only connected to one thing, which is the charging cable. So you can literally just unplug the devices and pick them up as you please. The absence of security just goes to show how much trust and honesty is part of the Japanese culture.
The level of safety is so high, much of the general nuisance of life is removed entirely. When you feel true peace in an urban environment, amazing things can happen. You can send your kids to school without fear. You can open a business without thinking that people are going to steal from you. Your transaction costs go down because you don't fear being cheated. All of it comes back to respect, to a culture where at a crosswalk, nobody, absolutely nobody will jaywalk because it is understood such a high quality of life is attainable only if everyone mutually agrees not to disturb the peace and to follow the rules. But that when finally, what really changed my American heart was this idea. What if the best place in the world is not a place that invents something, but instead refines it. Japanese culture is built on refinement. Its own history is incredible. It was a place entirely closed off from the world for centuries. It woke up one day and was shocked to find itself the potential prey of the imperial Western powers. Instead of succumbing to the imperialist West, they decided to do what they do, but even better. They sent envoys across the globe. They gathered information about technology, railroads, banking, education, and in a single generation went from a peasant farming feudal society to a rival industrial power capable of destroying the Russian colossus. Their major crime actually was accelerating imperialism and militarism past what even the West would dream of in its conquest of all of East Asia. Eventually, of course, that became their downfall. And yet, even then, from the literal ashes, it rises up to do it all over again. In the last 75 years, it went from a place razed to the ground to the third largest economy in the world. They did it again by not inventing things per se, but by refining them. The Japanese didn't invent the automobile, and yet today, Toyota is the best-selling car brand in the world. Why? By refining the car to be cheap, easy to fix, and reliable for the most major purchase that most people on Earth will make. This extends to consumer electronics, to fashion, to food, to everything. While I was in Japan, I was just amazed at how the so-called best of anything, it's there. Best men's fashion, Japan, no question. The level of attention to detail, the cultural reverence of craftsmanship means you can find the highest quality clothing in Tokyo. If you like coffee, like I do, you will find yourself oceans away from South America and Africa, drinking the best cup that you will ever find. If you want the best pizza, it's probably in Tokyo. Yes, I know that sounds crazy to the millions of people who flock to Italy every year. Don't take my word for it. Take it from the people who've tried it. The Michelin Guide for Tokyo boasts dozens of non-Japanese restaurants. Although, if you ask me, there's no reason to go and not just eat Japanese food. The same applies for basically every subcategory of Western life that requires any attention to detail and craftsmanship. In fact, one way that you know Japan is amazing is that their own population, which is very wealthy by any global standard and can easily afford to travel, has no desire to leave. Only 15% of the population has a passport. Less than 8% speak English fluently. They don't need to or care. They live in a great place. So I'm going to end with this. If you look for a through line between everything that I've discussed here, it's that culture is more important than anything else. That's why we are absolutely subject to the pressures of our environment. When you have a strong culture and a strong foundation, you can mold that environment to what you most highly value. In Japan, they have decided to mold their environment around mutual respect, prosperity, and dignity. That is a very hopeful story that all of us should consider as we decide what type of country that we want to live in. So that's it, Krystal. I love that place. I miss it terribly.
Hey guys, obviously I had a lot of thoughts on what Saagar had to say there. So if you want to see my thoughts on this monologue and every other Saagar monologue, make sure you subscribe at breakingpoints.com.